Life on my rural property was always peaceful, a refuge from the hustle and bustle of the city. I spent years cultivating my tubers with care and dedication, and the harvest was not only a source of sustenance but also a symbol of my hard work. However, this peace was brutally destroyed when I discovered that one of the HOA neighbors had dumped concrete and built an illegal parking lot over my crop. The HOA, an association I had never been part of, was always known for its strict rules and control over the community. I, however, maintained my independence, preferring not to submit to the regulations. When I saw the concrete spread over my soil and the parking lot right on top of my precious plants, a feeling of injustice and betrayal took over me. How could they have done this without even consulting me? That day, I woke up early as usual, ready for another day of work on the land. The sun had barely risen when I started my morning walk through the fields, eager to see the progress of my crops. However, as I got closer, I noticed something strange. There was an area that looked different, but I couldn't understand why. My heart started beating faster, a dark premonition growing inside me. When I finally reached the spot, my worst nightmare was confirmed. The soil, once rich and fertile, was covered by a thick layer of concrete. The newly constructed parking lot gleamed in the morning light, a sight that left me speechless. I fell to my knees, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. All my work, my years of dedication, were buried under that concrete. The plants I had cultivated with so much care were destroyed, mercilessly crushed. Anger quickly replaced despair. I stood up, determined to find out who had committed such an act of vandalism. It didn't take long to discover that the responsible party was one of the HOA neighbors, someone who always considered my refusal to join the association as an obstacle. He had decided to dump the concrete and build the parking lot without even consulting me, assuming he could do whatever he wanted because I was not part of the HOA. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. How could he disrespect my property in such a way? I went to the neighbor's house, anger boiling inside me. I knocked on the door with force, my mind swirling with thoughts of revenge and justice. When he opened the door, the shock on his face was evident. "What did you do to my land?" I shouted, my voice trembling with emotion. He tried to justify himself, claiming he thought the area was not being used and that the parking lot was necessary for the community. His words did nothing to ease my anger. "You had no right to do this." I shouted again, each word loaded with frustration. "This land is mine, and you destroyed it without permission." He shook his head, trying to stay calm. "Chris, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just thought it would be good for everyone. You know how the HOA works. We're trying to improve the community." His justifications were like salt in an open wound. Improve the community? What about my work? My harvest? This is a clear violation of my rights. The argument continued, escalating in intensity and emotion. Each word exchanged was like a spark in a powder keg, ready to explode. The feeling of injustice was overwhelming. I couldn't believe someone could be so insensitive and selfish. My hard work, my dedication, everything was destroyed in a single night by someone who had no regard for me or what I had built. The explosion of feelings was intense, a mix of anger, sadness, and a burning desire for justice. Finally, after a heated argument, I left the neighbor's house, determined to take legal action. I knew the fight would be long and hard, but I was determined to seek justice. I couldn't let him get away with destroying my property. My journey for justice was just beginning, and I was ready to face any obstacle that came my way. The injustice I suffered was not just an attack on my property, but also an attack on my spirit and dignity. I was determined to fight with all my might to restore what was mine and ensure that something like this never happened again. The HOA and my neighbor would learn that they couldn't just trample on others' rights with impunity. How could a community that prides itself so much on its rules and regulations allow something so horrible? The irony was palpable. While I was outside the HOA's bounds, my property, my sanctuary, was invaded and destroyed. The fight for justice was just beginning, and I was determined to win, not just for myself, but for all those who believe in justice and the protection of individual rights. This story of betrayal and struggle was just beginning, and I was prepared to face any challenge that came my way. I was determined to turn my anger and frustration into action and ensure that justice was done. The next chapters of my life will be a battle for justice and dignity, and I was ready to fight with all my strength. If you like following stories, reports, and surprising revelations seen on Reddit, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Illegal action and confrontation. The pain and anger I felt upon seeing my destroyed crop were overwhelming. The scene of concrete spread over my soil, where healthy tubers once flourished, consumed me in a way I had never experienced. I knew I had to act quickly. I decided to confront the neighbor immediately, leaving no room for excuses or justifications. I arrived at the neighbor's house with my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked on the door with a force I didn't know I possessed. When he opened the door, his expression alternated between surprise and nervousness. "What did you do to my land?" I shouted, my voice filled with indignation. The emotion was palpable, and I was not willing to let this go unnoticed. He tried to justify his actions, saying he thought the area was not being used and that the parking lot was necessary for the community. "I needed more space for the cars, Chris. You're not in the HO, so I thought you wouldn't mind so much," he said, trying to stay calm. His words were like a knife piercing my heart. "You destroyed my crop, my livelihood," I shouted, unable to contain my anger. "How could you do this without even consulting me? This land is mine, and you had no right to touch it." The neighbor began to defend himself, claiming he didn't know the area's importance to me and that he was just trying to improve the situation for everyone. "I really thought it would be better for the community. I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said, but his words sounded empty and insensitive. "Improve the community? What about my work? My harvest? You destroyed everything I built with so much effort." I responded, each word filled with frustration and pain. The confrontation quickly escalated. The argument became an intense exchange of accusations and justifications. He insisted that his actions were well-intentioned, while I couldn't accept that someone could be so negligent and disrespectful. The anger and frustration boiled inside me, each moment of confrontation increasing my determination to seek justice. "You will pay for this," I declared, my words full of fierce conviction. The neighbor tried to stay calm, but it was evident that he knew he had crossed a line. As the argument continued, other neighbors began to gather, attracted by the noise. Some watched with curiosity, others with concern. I could feel their eyes on me, but my attention was focused solely on the man who had destroyed my livelihood. "This isn't the first time you've crossed the line, and I won't let this go unpunished," I said, pointing my finger at him. "Chris, we need to resolve this in a civilized manner," he tried to argue, but I was beyond civility. "Civilized? You want to talk about civility after destroying my property?" I responded, feeling the weight of my words. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I decided to walk away. "You'll hear from my lawyers. This won't stay like this," I declared before turning and leaving. The decision to take legal action was clear. The injustice I had suffered needed to be corrected, and I was determined to see it happen. I returned home, my mind a storm of thoughts and emotions. The scene of destruction continued to flash before my eyes, each detail etched in my memory. I sat at my desk, picked up my phone, and started making calls. Lawyers, property dispute specialists, anyone who could help me build a solid case against my neighbor. The community was abuzz with the incident. Some neighbors came to me, expressing their support and indignation. "We can't believe he did this, Chris. Count on us for anything you need," they said, their words offering small but significant comfort. Others, however, remained silent, perhaps fearing the repercussions of taking sides. As I began to prepare my case, I started collecting evidence. I took detailed photos of the concrete in the parking lot, recorded videos showing the extent of the damage, and documented every detail that could support my case. Each piece of evidence was a weapon in my fight for justice. The feeling of being alone in this battle was overwhelming, but my determination was stronger. I knew I was fighting for something bigger than my property. I was fighting for my rights, for the dignity of my work, and for the justice I valued so much. Each moment of frustration and anger fueled my will to win this battle. The news of the confrontation and the illegal action quickly spread through the community. The HOA tried to downplay the incident, but the truth was evident to everyone who knew the situation. The actions of my neighbor had crossed all acceptable limits, and I was determined to make him answer for it. Night fell, and as I looked at the stars from my backyard, I reflected on what had happened. The anger still burned inside me, but there was a new sense of purpose. I knew the fight would be long and full of challenges, but I was prepared. I was ready to face injustice and ensure that my voice was heard. At that moment, I promised myself that I would not rest until justice was done. The destruction of my crop was a deep wound, but it was also a powerful motivation. I would turn my pain into action, my anger into determination, and ensure that my property and my work were respected. How will this legal battle unfold, and what challenges will Chris face in his quest for justice? Follow the next chapters to discover the twists and turns of this intense and emotional story. The pursuit of justice. The determination to seek justice became the driving force of my life. The pain of seeing my crop destroyed, coupled with the anger at my neighbor's betrayal, gave me relentless energy. I decided that I would not rest until justice was served. I hired lawyers specialized in property disputes, and we began gathering evidence. I took detailed photos of the concrete in the parking lot, recorded videos showing the extent of the damage, and documented every detail that could support my case. Each photo taken, each video recorded, was a stab in my heart, but also a weapon against the injustice I faced. The images of concrete spread over my soil, where healthy tubers once grew, were a silent testament to the destruction. I spent hours revisiting the area, capturing every angle, every detail. The crushed plants, the pieces of concrete mixed with the soil, were like scars on a once healthy body. As I gathered evidence, I also began documenting my story. I wrote about the years of hard work, about each successful harvest, about the love and dedication I poured into the land. These notes were not just for the lawyers, but for myself, a constant reminder of what I was fighting to protect. Each word written was a reminder of what was at stake. I faced the bureaucracy with a mix of frustration and hope. Reporting the illegal activities and presenting my case to the authorities was a slow process filled with obstacles. Every time it seemed like we were making progress, a new complication would arise. The feeling of being a small farmer facing a powerful entity was overwhelming at times, but my persistence was unwavering. I was determined to see justice served. The first major breakthrough came when my lawyers discovered that the parking lot construction had no legal authorization. This meant that the neighbor had not only destroyed my crop, but also violated local building laws. This discovery was a huge boost for our case. "We have a solid foundation to fight," said my lawyer, his voice filled with determination. "This is a clear violation of building laws." With this new information, we went to the city hall to report the illegal construction. We faced the bureaucracy, standing in endless lines and dealing with disinterested officials. But the truth was on our side, and each small advance was a victory. "We'll make sure he pays for this," said my lawyer, and I couldn't agree more. As we advanced with the case, the frustration with the difficulties of the process was constant. The bureaucracy seemed endless, each step a challenge. But with each obstacle, my determination grew. I was fighting for something much bigger than my crop. I was fighting for justice and the dignity of my work. The feeling of helplessness was replaced by renewed strength. During this time, I received support from many neighbors and friends. They came to me, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. "We're with you, Chris. This can't stand," they said, their words offering small but significant comfort. The community was beginning to unite around my cause, and this gave me a new sense of hope. One of the biggest surprises came from a neighbor I barely knew. He showed up at my door one night, bringing documents that showed other building violations by the HOA. "I thought this might help," he said, handing me the papers. I was surprised by his solidarity and grateful for the help. It was as if the community was uniting against the injustice. With each new piece of evidence, our case grew stronger. The accumulated evidence was overwhelming, clearly showing the extent of the destruction and the illegality of the neighbor's actions. We were ready to take the case to court, and my determination was unwavering. "We'll get justice, Chris," said my lawyer. "We're on the right track." The preparation for the trial was intense. I spent days reviewing the documents, rehearsing my testimonies, and ensuring that all the evidence was in order. Every detail was crucial, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The feeling of being on the brink of a great battle was palpable. I was nervous, but also excited about the possibility of finally getting justice. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed with community members and HOA representatives. My heart raced as I walked into the courtroom, carrying a folder full of documents and evidence. The judge entered, and silence filled the room. The sense of tension was almost suffocating. The neighbor's lawyer tried to argue that the construction was necessary and that I was exaggerating the damage. But our evidence was irrefutable. Photos, videos, legal documents all clearly showed the extent of the destruction and the illegality of the neighbor's actions. My testimony was filled with emotion, telling the story of my hard work and the betrayal I had suffered. "Your Honor, All I want is justice. I want my work to be respected, my property to be restored, and the responsible party to pay for the damages caused, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. The judge's words at the end of the trial brought intense relief. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court rules in favor of the plaintiff. The concrete and illegal parking lot must be removed immediately and the property restored to its original state. The judge's words were like a huge weight being lifted off my shoulders. Tears streamed down my face as I thanked my lawyers and friends who supported me throughout the process. Justice had prevailed, and my fight had finally been rewarded. The removal of the concrete began quickly, and seeing my land being restored was like seeing a dream come true. The feeling of relief and victory was indescribable. I had faced injustice and won. The community reacted positively to the court decision. Many residents came to me to express their support and outrage at what had happened. Even some HOA members acknowledged that the neighbors' actions had been unjustifiable. The fight for justice had been long and hard, but every moment of frustration and despair was rewarded. My determination and persistence were the keys to overcoming adversity. This experience reinforced my belief that it's worth fighting for our rights, no matter how powerful the opposition may seem. This journey showed that, even in the face of oppression, truth and determination can prevail. The victory was not just mine, but for all those who believe in justice and are willing to fight for it. And so, with my land restored and my spirit renewed, I moved forward, knowing that I had made a difference, not just for myself, but for the whole community. Resolution and outcomes. The judicial battle had been exhausting, but the victory brought a relief that could not be measured in words. However, the path to true resolution was just beginning. With the court ruling in my favor, the removal of the concrete and the restoration of my property began almost immediately. Seeing the workers remove the concrete that suffocated my land was a profoundly emotional experience. Each piece of concrete removed was like a part of the burden being lifted from my heart. The following days were filled with a mix of relief and anxiety. The restoration process was meticulous and required patience. I watched closely as the workers turned the soil, removing the debris and preparing the land to be fertile again. The scene was both painful and hopeful. Each shovel strike, each movement of the tractor, was a step towards recovery. During this time, the community around me was also changing. The court decision had set an important precedent, and the HOA, now under intense pressure, began to review its practices. Many neighbors who previously remained neutral or supported the HOA came to me to offer support and apologies. "Chris, I'm sorry for not realizing what is happening. If you need anything, we're here to help," some said, their words filled with remorse. As my land was restored, I began to realize that this battle had meant more than just the recovery of my crop. It had been a fight for justice, integrity, and respect for individual rights. The impact of this victory resonated throughout the community. The HOA, once a powerful and sometimes oppressive entity, now faced scrutiny it had never experienced. The positive reaction from the community was one of the most exciting aspects of this journey. I received messages and visits from neighbors expressing their support and sharing their own stories of injustice. "Chris, your fight gave us hope. We stand with you," said one of the neighbors, his words echoing the feeling of solidarity that was spreading. However, the battle was not yet fully won. The HOA, although defeated judicially, still tried to maintain its influence. Some members tried to minimize the court decision, claiming it was an exception. But the truth was clear, and I was determined to ensure they couldn't escape responsibility. With the land finally clear of concrete, I began the replanting process. Each tuber planted was a symbol of renewal and hope. The feeling of seeing the first green leaves sprouting from the soil was indescribable. It was as if the land was thanking me for fighting for it, for restoring its vitality. The emotion of seeing my crop begin to recover brought tears to my eyes. The community, inspired by my victory, began to demand more transparency and accountability from the HOA. Meetings were convened, and resident participation increased dramatically. People began to question decisions and demand explanations. The HOA, once an entity that operated with little opposition, now faced a united and vigilant community. The pressure on the HOA culminated in the resignation of several board members, including the president. The news of their resignations was met with a mix of relief and celebration by the community. "Finally, we're seeing real changes," said one of the residents during a community meeting. The sense of justice finally being achieved was palpable. While all this was happening, I remained focused on the restoration of my property. Working on the land was therapeutic, a way to process all the emotions and frustrations of the past months. Each day in the field was a reminder of why I had fought so hard. My connection to the land was deep, and seeing it flourish again gave me an indescribable sense of accomplishment. But the biggest surprise came during a community meeting. The HOA, now under new leadership and seeking to repair its image, proposed a new community restoration initiative. They offered resources and support to help fully recover my property and the areas affected by their previous actions. "We want to work together to rebuild trust in the community," said the new HOA president. The proposal was met with applause, and although I was skeptical at first, I decided to accept the help. Collaboration with the new HOA showed that even after a hard battle, reconciliation and cooperation were possible. Together, we worked on the restoration, and the community strengthened through this process. The impact on the community was profound. The fight for justice had transformed how people saw their own voices and rights. The HOA, once an oppressive force, now operated with more transparency and responsibility. The feeling that something positive had emerged from all the hardship was gratifying. Finally, after months of hard work, my property was fully restored. The plants flourished again, and the land seemed more alive than ever. The feeling of seeing my crop healthy and vibrant brought deep peace to my heart. I had fought for justice, and my land had been restored. This journey showed that, even in the face of oppression, truth and determination can prevail. The victory was not just mine, but for all those who believe in justice and are willing to fight for it. And so, with my land restored and my spirit renewed, I moved forward, knowing I had made a difference, not just for myself, but for the whole community. The impact of this experience was lasting. The community, now more united and vigilant, continued to fight for their rights and demand accountability. My story served as a reminder that it's worth fighting for justice, no matter how difficult the path. And as I looked at my flourishing crops, I knew I had achieved more than just a legal victory. I had achieved true justice. This story of struggle and resilience showed that even in the face of oppression, truth and determination can prevail. The victory was not just mine, but for all those who believe in justice and are willing to fight for it. And so, with my land restored and my spirit renewed, I moved forward, knowing I had made a difference, not just for myself, but for the whole community. If you enjoyed following this story, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to follow more stories, reports, and surprising revelations seen on Reddit, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. It will be a pleasure to have you with us.